Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're tackling a topic that is just, well, fundamental to any project's success, big or small.
Absolutely.
And honestly, it's something we all juggle in our personal lives too. Planning and managing budget and resources. It's kind of the bedrock, isn't it?
It really is. You can have the most brilliant idea, the perfect plan, but if you haven't got a handle on the money and the stuff you need the resources, it's probably going nowhere fast. It's the engine room.
The engine room. I like that. And look, we've got some detailed source material here, slides diving right into this area within project management. Specifically, we're drawing from Task 04 in the process domain of a new PMP exam content outline.
Yeah, and that gives us a really structured way to look at it. It lays out the key things you need to do.
So think of this as, your way of getting up to speed quickly, not just on what project budgeting is, but really how it's done, the tools, the techniques, and maybe most importantly, how you know if you're actually on the right track.
Before it's too late. Our goal here is basically to unpack all this from the sources, pull out the really key pieces, and help you feel, well, more confident dealing with budgets and resources on whatever project comes your way.
Okay, let's get into it then. So looking at the core steps in this task, plan and manage budget and resources. How do the sources break that down first?
Well, they outline four main parts. First up is estimate budgetary needs. That's essentially figuring out, how much money you think the project's going to cost, assessing requirements and putting some numbers to them.
Okay, put a good price tag on the work. Makes sense.
Then the second part is anticipate future budget challenges. This is all about being proactive, identifying potential risks, things that could blow up your budget later, and having contingency plans ready.
Right, because surprises always happen. You got to plan for them.
Exactly. Then once you're up and running, you monitor budget variations and work with the governance process. So tracking what you're actually spending versus the plan.
Constantly checking in.
Yeah, and making sure it all fits within the company's rules and procedures.
Okay, and the task title also says resources. What about that part?
Good point. The fourth component is plan and manage resources. This is broader. It's about strategically allocating all the things you need, people, materials, equipment, and money too, getting the most out of them.
Got it. So money and the other key ingredients. Where does this all fit in the big picture of project management?
The sources put this mostly in the planning and the monitoring and controlling phases. It lines up really closely with what's traditionally called project cost management. And, while the task covers resources broadly, the sources we're looking at today, they go really deep on the cost side.
Okay.
So that's going to be our main focus based on this material.
That makes sense. Managing the money is often super critical. And the sources break down that cost management into, four key processes?
They do. It's a logical flow. Starts with plan cost management, then estimate costs, then determine budget, and finally, control costs.
Okay, plan, estimate, determine, control. Seems straightforward enough. Set the rules, figure out the cost, get it approved, then keep an eye on it. Let's dig into that first one, plan cost management. Why do this right at the start?
Oh, it's foundational. Before you even think about numbers, you need to decide how you're going to handle everything related to cost, how you'll estimate, how you'll budget, manage, monitor, control, all of it.
So writing the playbook for costs, basically.
Exactly. The key benefit, as the sources point out, is it provides guidance, direction for everyone involved throughout the whole project, avoids confusion down the line.
And the main output is the cost management plan itself.
Yep, that's the document. It becomes part of your overall project plan.
What kind of things go into this plan, according to the sources? What specifics?
Several key things. Units of measure, for starters.
Okay.
Are you tracking costs in hours, days, square feet, lump sums?
Okay, how you'll measure, like cost per hour versus cost per item.
Right. Then, level of precision. That's about rounding. Do you go to the nearest dollar or include cents? $995.59 becomes $1,000 or stays as is.
Got it. How exact do the reports need to be?
Tied to that is level of accuracy. This sets the acceptable range for estimates, like is plus or minus 10% okay compared to the final actual cost, manages expectations.
Okay, setting the goalposts for how good the estimates need to be. What about control thresholds?
These are really important. They're the triggers, the agreed limits for cost variation before someone needs to step in. If you go, say, 10% over budget on an activity, that might trigger an alert or a review.
Little alarm bells?
Pretty much. The plan also needs organizational procedures links, making sure your project's cost approach ties into the company's wider financial systems and rules.
Right, so it doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Exactly. And that rules of performance measurement. This defines how you'll track performance. Are you using earned value management? We'll get to that. But you define the metrics here.
Okay, the how we measure success part.
And finally, reporting formats. What do the cost reports look like? How often do they go out? Who gets them? All defined up front.
Okay, it's pretty comprehensive for just the planning phase. So, with that plan sorted, next up is estimate costs. This is where the numbers start appearing.
Exactly. This process is about developing an approximation. It's key to remember it's an estimate at this stage, not the final number, an approximation of the money needed for the work.
Putting a likely price tag on things.
Yeah. The key benefit, figuring out the monetary resources the project is likely going to need.
And you do this for each individual activity or piece of work.
Typically, yes. You break the project down, maybe using a work breakdown structure, and estimate the cost for each component.
What costs are we talking about including here?
Well, the obvious ones. Direct labor, materials, equipment, facilities, IT, services. But importantly, the sources say you also need to factor in contingency reserves.
Ah, contingency. For those risks you sort of know might happen?
Exactly, the known unknowns. You set aside money for them. And you also include indirect costs, things like overhead, shared resources.
Right. So getting good estimates here is crucial for making sound decisions later.
Absolutely. They're the basis for the budget, for tracking performance. Super important.
Now, this is where it gets interesting for me. The sources talk about several different ways to estimate costs. It's not just one method.
Oh, definitely not. And the right one depends on how much detail you have. The quickest method, but usually the least accurate, is analogous estimation.
That sounds like guessing based on past experience. Like, this looks like that other project which cost X amount.
That's pretty much it. You use historical data from similar past projects. It's top-down, often used very early when you don't have much detail yet.
Okay, fast but rough. What's a step up from that?
Parametric estimation. This one's generally more accurate. It uses historical data too, but combines it with statistical relationships between variables.
Okay, cost per square foot for painting. You know the rate, you know the size, you calculate the cost.
Exactly that. If painting costs $2 per square foot and you have 500 square feet, you estimate $1,000. You're using a parameter, a unit rate.
Got it. More specific. Then there's three-point estimation. That sounds like hedging your bets.
In a way, yes. It tries to account for uncertainty and reduce bias. You come up with 3 estimates for each activity. Optimistic, O, best case cost, most likely M, what you really think it will cost, and pessimistic P, worst case cost.
So a range instead of single number. How do you use those 3 points?
Well, the sources give 2 formulas to get a single weighted estimate, E. There's the triangular distribution, which is just a simple average, E equal O plus M plus P3.
Easy enough. Average the best, worst, and most likely.
Right. But then there's the beta distribution, often called PER. This one gives more weight to the most likely estimate. The formula is E, O plus 4M plus P6.
Ah, you multiply the middle one by 4. Why do that? Why is that one often preferred?
Because often, the most likely really is significantly more probable than the extreme best or worst cases. This formula reflects that statistically. The sources even give an example calculation.
Oh, yeah.
If O is $500, M is $700, and P is $1,200. Using the beta formula, you get 500 plus 4,700 plus 1,206 equals $750.
Okay, $750, which is closer to the $700 most likely than the simple average would have been. That makes sense. It pulls the estimate towards the most probable outcome.
Exactly. Now, if you want the most accurate estimate,
Let me guess. It takes the most work.
you got it. That's bottom-up estimation. It's the most accurate, but also the most time-consuming and needs the most detail.
How does it work?
You estimate the cost for the smallest pieces of work, like individual tasks or work packages in your work breakdown structure, WBS. Then you add or roll up all those detail estimates to get the total.
Okay. So if you have a detailed WBS, this is the way to go for precision. I think I saw a practice question about using this with a WBS.
That's a very common connection, yes. It's precise because you're estimating very specific, manageable chunks of work.
And the last technique listed is just expert judgment.
Yep. Basically, using the knowledge of people who know what they're talking about. Experts with experience on similar work can provide or sanity check estimates, often used alongside other techniques.
All right, so we've estimated the costs for all the pieces using one or more of these methods. Now what? Determine budget.
That's the next process, determine budget. This is where you take all those individual estimates and aggregate them, roll them up to establish the official project budget and, crucially, the authorized cost baseline.
Okay, this sounds like where it becomes official, the approved spending limit.
Pretty much. And the key output, the main benefit, is that cost baseline. That's your yardstick. It's what you'll measure your actual spending against later on.
And the sources show how it builds up, right?
Well,
Activity costs roll up to work packages, then control accounts.
yes, exactly. It shows that hierarchy. Activity estimates feed into work package estimates, which feed into control account estimates, culminating in the overall project estimate.
But wait, that project estimate?
Yeah.
That's not the final total budget number you asked for, is it? There's more.
Correct. On top of that aggregated estimate, you add your contingency reserves, remember those, for the identified risks.
Right. The known unknown.
And then you add management reserves.
Okay, management reserves. What's the difference again? This seems important.
It's critical and, yeah, often comes up. Management reserves are for unforeseen work or risks. The unknown unknowns, things you genuinely couldn't identify during planning. These reserves are usually controlled by management, not the project manager directly, for use when truly unexpected things hit the budget.
Okay, so contingency known risks, management unknown risks.
That's that.
And adding both reserves to the project estimate gives you the total project budget?
Correct. But the cost baseline itself, the thing you primarily track performance against with EVM, is typically the project estimate plus the contingency reserves, but excluding the management reserve.
Ah, okay. So the baseline is the approved budget for the planned scope and its known risks. And the sources mention this baseline is often shown as an S-curve over time.
Yeah, that's a common way to visualize it. Cumulative planned spending over the project duration usually starts slow, ramps up in the middle, then tapers off. Looks like an S.
They also mention funding limit reconciliation briefly. What's that?
That's just about making sure your planned spending profile, that S-curve, doesn't exceed any funding limits imposed by the organization. Maybe you only get X amount per quarter. If your plan needs more than that in Q2, you might have to reschedule work to smooth out the spending.
Okay, makes sense. Aligning the plan with the cash flow reality. So we've planned how to manage cost, estimated the numbers, set the baseline. Now we actually have to do the project and keep costs under control.
Exactly. We're into the control cost process now. This is the ongoing monitoring, checking the project's cost status, updating the figures, and managing any changes to that cost baseline we just set.
This sounds like the active week-by-week part, watching the dials.
It is. You're making sure spending lines up with the budget, keeping the baseline accurate, and crucially, spotting differences between plan and actual early so you can figure out why and take action if needed.
And this is where earned value management, EVM, really comes into its own right. The sources seem to emphasize this quite a bit for control.
Hugely. EVM is incredibly powerful. It's a method that integrates the project's scope, schedule, and cost performance. It tells you not just how much you've spent, but how much progress you've made for the money spent compared to the plan.
It goes beyond just looking at the bank balance. And there are 4 key terms the sources introduce for EVM.
Yes, gotta get these definitions clear. First is planned value. PV, that's the authorized budget for the work that was scheduled to be done by a certain point in time, what you plan to achieve and spend by today.
Okay, PV, planned progress value.
Right. Then, earned value, EV. This is the value, measured in budget terms, of the work actually completed by that same point in time. It's the planned cost of the work you've successfully finished.
Okay, so EV is the value of actual progress. So let's use an example. Say I plan to paint half a room by Friday, and that half was budgeted at $200. My PV is $200.
Right.
But if Friday comes and I've only painted a quarter of the room and that quarter was budgeted at $100, my EV is $100, even if I spent way more getting it done.
Perfect. Your EV is $100 because that's the planned value of the work you actually finish, which leads to the third term, actual cost, AC.
That sounds like what I actually spent.
Exactly. The total cost actually incurred for the work performed up to that point, the real money that went out the door.
So in my painting example, if I only did the quarter room, EV $100, but I spilled paint, needed extra rollers, and spent $150, my AC is $150.
Precisely. And the last key term is budget at completion, BAC.
That's the total budget for the whole project.
Yep. The total planned value for all the work. Essentially your cost baseline total.
Okay, so PV planned, EV earned value of work done, AC actual spend, and BAC total budget. Got those. Now with these we can calculate variances and performance indices, earned variance analysis.
Correct. These calculations really tell the story. First, schedule variance, SV, that's EV minus PV. SVLA is EV PV.
And if it's positive, I'm ahead of schedule, negative, behind, 0 on track.
You got it. In your example,
Yeah.
EV, $100, PV, $200. So SV equals $100, $200 equals $100. You are $100 worth of planned work behind schedule.
Ouch, okay. And cost variance, CV.
That's EV minus AC. CV equals EV AC.
And positive is good, under budget, negatives, over budget, zeros on budget.
Exactly. In your example, EV $100, AC $150. So CV $150, $150, you're $50 over budget for the work you've actually completed.
Double ouch. Behind schedule and over budget for what I've done. These variances give you the dollar amount off track. What about the indices?
The indices give you the efficiency rate. First, Schedule Performance Index, SPI. That's EV divided by PV. SPI equal EVPV.
Okay, EVPV. If it's over 1, I'm working faster than planned. Under 1, slower. 1 is on pace.
Perfect. Your EV $100, PV $200, SPI $100, $200, 0.5. Since 0.5 is less than 1, you're progressing at only 50% of the planned speed, clearly behind schedule.
That 0.5 feels starker than the mentioned $100 somehow. It tells me the rate of the problem.
It does. It's a ratio of efficiency. Same idea for the Cost Performance Index, CPI. That's EV divided by AC. CPI equals EVAC.
EVAC. So over 1 means I'm getting more value out than money spent. Under budget efficient. Under 1 means I'm spending more than the value I'm getting over budget efficient. 1 is bang on budget.
Exactly. Your example, EV $100, AC $150, CPI $150, about 0.67.
0.67. So for every dollar I'm spending, I'm only earning 67 cents worth of planned work.
Yeah.
That CPI below 1 feels like a really big warning sign, doesn't it? The sources emphasize this, right? It suggests a systemic issue.
Absolutely. A CPI consistently below 1 is a major red flag. It means your current cost efficiency is poor, and unless something changes, you're likely heading for a budget overrun. And like you said about SPI, the practice questions reinforce that SPI 1 points to schedule trouble needing attention. These indices are incredibly useful health checks.
So EVM isn't just about looking back at what happened. It helps predict the future, too. Forecasting.
Yes, that's another key use. You use current performance to forecast the final outcome. A major forecast is the estimate at completion, EAC.
The new guess for the total final cost.
Exactly. There are various formulas, but a very common one highlighted in the sources assumes your current cost performance, CPI, will continue. That formula is EAC equals BAC CPI.
Okay, EAC equals BAC CPI. So if my total budget, BAC, was, say, $500, and my CPI is that awful 0.67, my EAC would be 500.67, about 746 cents.
Correct. And notice, as a practice question pointed out, that EAC 746 is much higher than the original BAC $500. BAC is the mathematical confirmation that you're projecting to finish over budget.
Yeah, if my efficiency CPI is less than 1, my final cost estimate EAC is going to be higher than planned BAC. Makes sense.
What's estimate to complete, ETC?
ETC is just the forecast of how much more money you need to spend from now until the end of the project. A simple way, once you have EAC, is ETC equals AACAC.
Okay, so if my new total estimate EAC is $746 and I've already spent $150, then my ETC is $746, $150, $596. That's what I expect to spend to finish the rest. Precisely. It's the cost for the remaining work.
Okay, then there's this other index, TCPI. To complete performance index. Sounds demanding.
It is, in a way. Think of it as the cost performance you must achieve on the remaining work to meet a specific target. Usually either the original BAC or the new EAC. It's the required CPI for the rest of the project.
The efficiency hurdle I need to clear from here on out.
Good way to put it. The sources give two main versions. To see if you can still hit the original BAC, the formula is TCPI, BAC, 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 EC. Work remaining divided by funds remaining relative to BAC.
Okay, and if hitting the original budget is impossible and the target is now the EAC.
Then it's TCPI, EAT, BAC, EV, same work remaining on top, but divided by funds remaining relative to the EAC forecast.
How do we read these TCPI numbers?
If TCPI is greater than 1, it means the efficiency needed for the rest of the project is higher than 1, i.e. better than planned. You need to perform more efficiently than planned just to hit the target. It's harder to achieve.
So TCPI 1, tough road ahead.
Yep. But if TCPI is less than 1,
that means I can actually be less efficient than planned for the remaining work and still hit the target.
Exactly. It means you have some cushion. It's easier to complete within the target. A practice question example showed TCPI equals 0.9, indicates the project is comfortably within its budget goal because the required future efficiency is less than 1.
Okay, that makes sense. TCPI 1, need to improve efficiency. TCPI 1 equals have some breathing room on cost efficiency. It quantifies the challenge remaining.
Precisely.
Now, this all sounds very rooted in traditional plan-development projects. The sources mentioned EVM and Agile too. How does that work when the scope might be more fluid?
Good question. Yeah, they touch on it. The key adaptation is the unit of measure. Instead of using cost, dollars, euros, whatever, for PV and EV, agile teams often use story points.
Oh, so PV becomes planned story points for a sprinter release, and EV is earned story points actually completed.
Exactly. You can then calculate SPI and CPI using story points. SPI, earned points, plan points. It gives you a similar view of progress and velocity against the plan, just using Agile's native estimation units.
The sources give an example, right? Planned points, PV, equals 25. Earned points, EV equals 22. SPI equals 22. 25 equals 0.88.
Yep, showing the team delivered fewer points than planned, so they're behind schedule, SPI 1, in terms of future delivery. It shows the core EVM concepts are adaptable.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground there on the cost management side, drawing heavily from those PMP framework sources.
We really have, from setting the rules with plan cost management through the different estimating techniques, setting that all-important cost baseline with reserves, and then the whole control cost process, especially using earned value management.
Yeah, understanding PV, EV, AC, BAC, and then calculating and, more importantly, interpreting SV, CV, SPI, CPI, and even the forecasting with the AC and TCPI. That gives you such a powerful, objective lens on how a project is really doing.
It moves way beyond just how much have we spent to are we getting the planned value for our money? Are we on schedule? What's it going to take to finish? It fuels informed decisions.
Absolutely. And whether it's a huge work project or, planning a big personal event or even a home renovation, these core ideas provide a solid way to think about keeping things on track financially.
It's all about making smart choices with finite resources. That's the heart of it.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. How could applying just the basic concept of earned value, tracking what you actually accomplished, EV, against what you plan to accomplish, PV, and what it actually cost you, maybe in time, AC, change how you approach a personal goal this week? Could you calculate a simple SPI or CPI for, say, your exercise plan or studying? What might it tell you?
That's a fascinating challenge, applying these professional tools to personal productivity.
Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.